will start with our first speaker, Col Roelen, who's already standing next to us. And he will introduce the theme of today. And with that, he will offer you some context to start from this afternoon. And hopefully he gives you some perspective you can take with you while listening to all the interviews and the demonstrations you see. We hope that you have an interesting day, that you hear new things. You don't need explanations, for example, but maybe it offers you an opportunity to catch up on the latest developments within the artillery. And most of all, we hope that you have the opportunity to think along on improving and developing the fire support. Col Roelen, he is the commander of the Fire Support Command and an advisor on fire support for the Army. He gives advice, but also guidance on how to further develop the fire support to be able to stay capable to bring effective firepower into operations. Colonel, could you tell us the theme of today and how it's linked to further developing the fire support?
Yes, thank you for the introduction, and I will. Well, if we look at the development of the fire support in the Netherlands, we meet a challenge. And there are a few reasons for that. And one is that for the 25 years we have been focusing on stabilization operations and peace support operations. However, the world, like Rika said, is changing. And we see an increasing strategic competition. And by that reason, we see a new focus on combat operations, on the defense of our national territories, not only in the Netherlands, but also in NATO alliance. So that means a new focus from stabilization operations, peace support operations, to combat operations. However, the ability to conduct these kind of operations, not only for the Netherlands, but for most Western countries, is limited due to the fact that we have been focusing on other developments. So we need to invest in that ability to do that. However, and then we get to a second reason, it is difficult to invest in this kind of warfare because we have a limited opportunity to invest in it. And for a part, it has to do with the political context in which we live. For example, the budget, the defense budget, to increase capacities for the army, to provide each brigade with the capacities needed for combat operations. And how much, anyway, it doesn't matter how much we invest in quantity compared to some main opponents like the Russian Federation and China, we will always be lacking behind compared to these components in quantity. So the challenge we have is how can we fill that gap? And the only possibility to do that in the political context nowadays is to invest in quality of the whole fire support network. And that is from the sensor to the shooter. And that is how we get to the title, improve the speed of the sensor to the shooter link. And we have to improve every element of this system to be able to increase that quantity well enough. And that is our focus for the coming year. Focus on the whole artillery system, a small one, but make the quality very high, because then it's easier to expand into quantity than the other way around. Invest in quantity and improve the quality. So that's the challenge ahead of us, and that's the link between the development of the artillery and the topic of today, speeding up the sensor-to-shooter link. Yeah.
Colonel, thank you very much. Interesting view on that topic. With regard to the development of the fire support, we have seen recent conflicts in which the artillery has played a big role. What can we learn from recent military conflicts like the Ukraine, Syria, Nagorno-Karabakh? What is in it, what we can learn and should learn from?
Yes. Well, these conflicts are an example of how combat operations could look like. And we see that possible opponents, have invested in this kind of operations, contrary to most Western countries in Europe. We have, like I said, focused on 30 years of stability operations, and we have invested in the army, but the innovations have mainly focused on counter-terrorism. Countering IED threat is, for example, an innovation where we have made huge steps. But war fighting is something different. And the result is that we have an imbalance, us with possible opponents. And that leads to tactical challenge. For the Netherlands combat operations, we focus mainly on the brigade level, the level of combined arms. So that's what I'm talking about if I talk about tactical challenges. And the challenges are an enemy with mass artillery, many sensors, multiple different sensors, high mobility, a high level of control over the electromagnetic domain, air defense, cyber. We see also that they conduct not only regular or conventional warfare, but at the same time irregular as well. So all these things together provide us with multiple dilemmas. And what we learn, these enemy capabilities and abilities, they influence the way we have to operate and what we need, what kind of capacities. And it's not just material and technology, it's the whole concept. So what we find out is that we have to develop all the elements of combat power. So it's the physical, it's the mental, and it's the conceptual part to be able to deal with this challenge that possible opponents provide us with. And before we can do that, one mark, the key to that is to have knowledge and understanding of the topic of warfighting. What is warfighting? And that has two elements. It's the nature of warfare and the character of warfare, but we will get into that probably.
Yes, that's what I want to ask you. Do you think that has changed and will change in the future? We all think about warfighting, but does that change in the future?
It always changes. But there's an element that doesn't change, and that's the nature of warfare. And there's an element that changes, that's the character. And that nature of warfare, that's that's the fundamental, the philosophical part of it. Warfare is a clash of violence. It's organized, large-scale violence. That remains the same. But what is different is how it is fought. That changes per era. And a dominant factor is the strategic components, which opponents do we have, but another dominant factor is technology. We cannot deny that technological developments have a major influence on how we conduct warfare. For one reason, if the enemy invests in new technology and controls the use of the electromagnetic domain, we have to invest in that as well to be able to conduct combat operations. And if we look at the fire support system, the basis of this system doesn't change. You have sensing, you have deciding, you have shooting, acting, the basis is the same. But if we look at then, for example, the technology or how the enemy operates, that changes. And we have to understand, better than we do now, how do possible opponents do that? Because only then we can identify in what smart way can we invest. And this is more than technology. It starts with a concept. How can we be smarter than the opponent?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Colonel. What struck me is on the military conflicts you discussed, for instance, Ukraine, Syria, and Nagorno-Karabakh, is that within the Netherlands, some of us might think that artillery is something from ancient times, that is something we won't do in the future anymore. And what we see in current operations is that artillery plays still an important role on battlefields. So how do you think warfighting will look like in the future?
Well, we do not exactly know that, because the current operations are examples from the past. So we don't know how the warfighting in the future look like. And for that, I want to use a quote from Sir Michael Howard. He's a British professor in military history. And the quote is the next. "No matter how clearly one thinks, it is impossible to anticipate precisely the character of future conflict. The key is not to be so far off the mark that it becomes impossible to adjust once that character is revealed." And that's the challenge now. So what is this red line we have to follow from where we can adjust if we understand the true character of the conflict we are dragged into or we choose to fight? We don't know. But one thing is for sure, artillery is a historical continuity. Wars are fought with artillery. And I think that will be the case as well. And we see the role of artillery, or fire support, better to say, is changing. Like in the 20th century, we have seen an increased use of air support. That's different from the centuries before. And we will see probably more unmanned ammunition types, like loitering munition and so on. So that will change. But the role of artillery as a dominant combat power at the brigade and divisional level, I think that is unchanged. So that's, I think, a historical continuity and a certainty.
And the red line that you talk about, is that the reason why you choose for quality first? Did you say?
Yes. Because you have to understand the context in which we operate. It's not only operational context, but also the national political context. So, like if we look at a possible opponent, the Russian Federation, their concept is mass artillery. So, huge investments in recce for target acquisition and mass artillery guns. You know, we have to be realistic. That's not going to happen in the Netherlands. Probably also not with the new cabinet. So, although it is necessary, dus maybe we have to get mass in the NATO alliance. So we cannot wait and hope for that to happen. But what we can do in the meantime is see, okay, how can we improve the system as a whole, the fire support system, every element. And that starts with understanding warfighting, understanding the opponent. For example, what artillery do they have? How do they operate their artillery system, their EW, their air defense, their command and control systems? Because these are our main targets. And then secondly, how does that influence our way of operating? And then we have to become smart. For example, their capacity determine if our Panzerwitz, for example, can stay stationary on a location for 1 minute, 3 minutes, or 3 hours. We have to know that. We have to have that knowledge. How long can our fire direction center be static? We don't know yet. So this is not technology, but this is understanding the context in which we operate and translate that to what does that mean for us. We are just beginning to understand that, and we have to make huge steps to improve. And that's, I think, the first main part in what we have to do, the challenge ahead.
Just to summarize, Colonel, if you were talking about peer competitors such as Russia, and I think the Russian army is sometimes referred to as an artillery army with tanks.
Yeah.
What we see is that the tempo in future operations will be much higher, and therefore, since we can't keep up with quantity, we need to invest in quality to speed up the sensor to suit link as good as we can. Is that how you should? Could you agree on that summary?
Yes, exactly what you say. We will not have that mass. So if we are able to speed up our system with the right and enough sensors, then we have a higher output of our system with limited shooters, with limited guns. And that's what we have to focus on. And then with less platforms of less guns, we are able, hopefully, to to destroy enough enemy. And that's what we have to do with improving the quality of this fire support system, because of lack of quantity. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking that, of course, I'm an organizational psychologist, and of course, I'm interested in the human role. So I would like to ask you what the role is of the human in this area of continuous developments.
I have 2 remarks on that. And the first is maybe a little bit of a technical one. If you want to speed up that link, you look at how you can automate certain things. We have done that. For example, technical target analysis with FSS and VICE. We have digitalized that, and that has speeded up that process. And there's more. For example, with the new multi-mission radar, we can automate the target identification. And then you come to a system from man in the loop who has to understand what he is looking at and to make the decision what kind of target it is. The machine does that for him, and he has to watch that, the man on the loop. That's an improvement of the speed as well. And we have to look where can we find these advantages in time to make the system faster. That's one element of it. And I think it's a dominant one, you know. Opponents will do that, and we hear all these fancy stories about artificial intelligence in a further away future where this will be much faster. We will have to wait on that, how that will run. But the more important thing is the next, you know, making this system better, smarter, you know. It's people who have to find these solutions. Innovations are identified by human beings. They have to understand the opponent. They have to understand our national political context. They have to come up with solutions how to improve that system to be better and smarter than your opponent. That's all humans. And that's only possible if we bring the right humans together. It's people with different opinions, with different insights, because then we get depth. And then we get real quality. And I think that's a quality for a small country like the Netherlands, where we are normally able to organize these kind of discussions and this quality. And we see, for example, today this multi-mission radar as a example for this. But this role of the human is, I think, dominant. Yeah.
Yes, very dominant. Maybe our biggest challenge.
No, because I think we have, in our small artillery community, we have a lot of very good people, highly experienced, although we don't have experience in the combat operations. So that's a big plus, and it's my task to organize this, and that's what we will do in the coming period. And this event is a step into that direction, to start a discussion and to show our challenges and our thoughts on how to meet these challenges.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Colonel, thank you very much. I'm not sure how much time we have left, about 5 minutes, okay.
Perfect.
But do you think that within the fire support community, as you just described, that we have enough mass and critical thinking to pool it together and to make sure that we speed up this sensor-to-shooter link?
No, it's a start. And then you get to another quality of our country, I guess. We have to link up with other people who have knowledge. And that is, for example, the industry and knowledge institutes like TNO or others. Because only if we innovate together, we get the required quality. We as a military, we have a limited knowledge as well, like technicians from the industry have. And only together you get a smarter, better solution. And we have good examples of that in the Netherlands. I think that how we developed Vuist and AFSIS in the past is a very good example. We did that together. And that's at the start, the operational military, they were skeptic as well, you know. At least I was when in this first exercise I got this Vuist equipment. But the second exercise, it was already better. And that surprised us. And the third exercise, it was even more improved. And that's the way forward as well for the current era. So it's this golden triangle, we always use that word in the Netherlands, that will be essential to reach this quality. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Kim, do you have any additional questions for the Colonel?
No,
because now is your chance.
No, thank you.
Then, Colonel, do you have any closing remarks already, or do you save them for later this afternoon?
I will have one remark, and that's the next. If we look at the titles, speeding up the sensor-to-shooter link, and if we look at our history as a Western country, you know, very often the focus is on technology, on a weapon system, an airplane, a tank, the gun, on these kind of equipment. And that's good because these capacities are essential. But it's not the essence of what we need. Because we have a predominant focus on technology in our countries. And that's not the solution to our problems. So we have to be smart on that and look at the whole concept. And And that starts with understanding the concept of warfighting, because that is the basis of what we have to do. And secondly is understand the specific opponents we could meet in the future. And only then we are able to identify the developments necessary. That's the core.
Thank you. Thank you.
Satisfied?
Yes,
Kim?
great introduction. And from here we
Thank
will
you very much,
start.
Colonel.
And I think that's a great introduction to introduce all the other speakers that will be zooming in on this topic. What you can do now is you can go to the virtual rooms if you view the program, and then you see the virtual rooms that are up next. Up next is the Saab live demo. You can watch the live 120 millimeter demonstration, or you can view the Hensoldt counter UAV and security solutions. So you can leave the lobby, go to the program, and click on the virtual room, and we will see you back in about 15 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Colonel.
Welcome.